All right, let's get the show on the road. Hello everyone, this is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Rebel, and welcome to episode number 20, broadcast number 26 of the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast. Haha. All right, this is the one about Bruce Lee and Jeet Kune Q&A. So it's just a few questions that that I've been sent in over time and that I've fielded from different sources. So we're just going to spend a few minutes on this today. We're going to take some, not an in-depth, I might actually reserve that for another separate broadcast. As you guys come on and you're taking a look at the broadcast, be sure to hit the like button and what have you. As usual, feel free to comment while we're doing the broadcast. I won't have the time to necessarily respond or comment back to you as we do this, but I will go through the comments after I've posted the video, and then I'll reply to you at that time. All right, so we're talking about Bruce Lee Jeet Kune Q&A. So the main question that came in was if Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune has no form or no style, right? Because these are things that you will hear people, sometimes it depends on the level of information that they have, right? So if Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune has no form or no style, how did he practice it? Did he practice random stuff, right? And so in answering that, I point out to people that there's a difference. I should have written, let's see, maybe I can write it down real quickly right now and show it to you guys. I don't have a blank, yeah, maybe I have a blank piece of paper, okay? So here's the deal. You're correct in saying that Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune has no form or no style, but you want to understand the difference between having, let's see, I'll put it this way, right? Having no form, right, versus having no form. You see, right? So don't confuse no form with no form. It might appear to be semantics, but it's actually much more important than that, right? So in the Tao of Jeet Kune, right, on Bruce Lee's notes, so I got it marked here, page 25. He says, expression is not developed through the practice of form, yet form is a part of expression. The greater expression is not found in the lesser expression, but the lesser is found within the greater. Having no form then does not mean having no form. Having no form evolves from having form. No form is the higher individual expression. There is another passage from the Tao. I don't think it's right here, but I have it written here. It says that good form may be defined as the particular technique which enables the individual to attain maximum efficiency in the activity, right? So listen again. Good form may be defined as the particular technique which enables the individual to attain maximum efficiency in the activity. Now, I would even backtrack on that and say that what Bruce Lee is actually talking about here, to a certain degree, is attribute. You see, because remember that an attribute, the Jeet Kune definition of an attribute is a quality which allows the successful execution of the technique, or the proficiency of the technique. So attributes like speed and distance awareness and timing and power and that kind of stuff, right? So good form may be defined as the particular technique which enables the individual to attain maximum efficiency in the activity. So obviously the idea of form was important to Bruce Lee because he wrote so much about it. But people, one of the things that people should remember is the particular terminologies that were being used in the 1960s and 70s when Bruce Lee did his writing. The word form back in the 60s and 70s referred to what in the what do you call it, in the Japanese method we might call the kata, right? Or in the Korean method we might call, I think it was called a pumse or hyung or something like that, right? So, and we'll talk about this as we go through. So the idea of form practice or kata practice was integral in the old days, and perhaps one of the initial most radical departures from an approach to martial art training by Bruce Lee was the eschewal of the practice of kata and what have you. As far as practicing random stuff, if you take a look at Bruce Lee's training regimen, then you would see that there was nothing random about it at all. We actually touched on this a little bit in last week's broadcast when I showed you stuff from the art of expressing the human body, right? So if I have that marked too. It's like 20 pages, I think, of starting on page 172, where you get to take a look at Bruce Lee's day timer and how he had all of his everything that he was going to be training on that day. He had it all listed out, and then you just see the complete record of his approach to training. So the idea that Jeet Kune Do, I think sometimes it's because of this idea of Jeet Kune Do being formless, right, or what have you, right? That's where people get this idea then that there is no set approach to Jeet Kune Do training, and that's not true. There is a set approach, but it doesn't mean that the set approach is that way every single time. But it means that you do have to have an understanding of what your ultimate goal is. So you do have to start with the end in mind, so to speak. But it's not like going into, again, let's think in terms of 1960s, 1970s, a traditional or classical martial art class where if I'm a white belt, every time I go to class, I do the white belt stuff. So it's pretty much the same thing over and over and over again. Don't get me wrong. There is a necessity for repetition. But what Bruce Lee was trying to say is that the same dead repetition, that's where the problem occurs, right? So, and I did make a note here, but I'll go into it now. This is something I got from my senior Cas Magda over 30 years ago. And it was, again, let's call it semantics, right? But it was the use of these three words in Jeet Kune Do. The word style, the word system, and the word method. And style in Jeet Kune Do, as opposed to the way, again, thinking of it in terms of historical context. The word style in the 1960s and the 70s might refer to the art that you practice. So if you see an Enter the Dragon, the guy goes, "What's your style?" Right? That was kind of a way of saying, well, what art do you practice, right? But then within, let's say, the art of Kung Fu, there could be different styles. There could be, Lohan, there could be Hunga, there could be Hung Kyun, or what have you, right? So when we talk about style in Jeet Kune Do, style refers to your individual way of doing what you do. So if we look at let's look at boxers, right? So Muhammad Ali's style was different from Joe Frazier's style, and Ali's and Frazier's styles were different from George Foreman's style. But they were all involved in the art of boxing. Right? So they had to do the same, whatever it is that boxing requires, right? The technical aspects of boxing didn't change necessarily, but their styles were different. The word system, actually, let's do method first. So method, it's like, and I'll use boxing again just for simplicity. So in training boxing, one person might favor the use of the heavy bag. So a fighter like George Foreman, the heavyweight like George Foreman, might have favored the use of the heavy bag because Foreman's idea was to hit you with one punch and just knock the crap out of you. So he might have spent more time on the heavy bag than he would have spent time on the focus mitt, because you don't learn to generate the same amount of power in your punch using the focus mitt as you learn to generate using the heavy bag. So the Foreman method might incorporate more heavy bag training than it might have incorporated focus mitt training. So when you take your methods and you put them together for your own edification, then that becomes the system. You see? So style is your individual way of doing what you do. Of course, keeping in mind that efficiency is what's most important. Method is what are the things that you like to do? And then the way you put that together becomes system. So that was just a little tangent there, because as I was making my notes for today's show, I remembered Cass and I having the discussion about that, right? So that was question number one, about Bruce Lee's approach to training. Question number two is kind of tricky, because it is, why isn't Jeet Kune Do more widely practiced? And I say that it's tricky because it's not that Jeet Kune Do is not widely practiced. I think in many cases, it just might not be identified as such, or even advertised as such, right? Now, if we look at this historically there was never a widespread attempt to promote Bruce Lee's art in a commercial manner, right? In fact, to the best of my understanding, at the same time in 1970 that on the west coast of the United States, Dan Inosanto was instructed to close the Chinatown school and take people to his backyard. Bruce Lee's good friend, the recently, rest in peace, departed Jun Rhee, Grandmaster Jun Rhee, on the east coast of the United States, he was making the decision to expand the reach of his Taekwondo system. So we had Jeet Kune Do on the west coast contracting and becoming smaller, and we had Taekwondo on the east coast expanding and attempting to become bigger. And then if you understand anything about the history of Taekwondo and the history of Jeet Kune Do in the United States, you can see that that these things actually did come to fruition, right? So there is that aspect. The other thing is the phenomenon of the martial art, the phenomenon of the martial art camp or the martial arts seminar, which continues to a certain degree today. So there is really, that was the era, especially in the 80s and the 90s, where Jeet Kune Do started to spread literally all over the world, right? So there was a widespread practice, but there's a hidden aspect to a certain degree. There's a hidden aspect to the practice of Jeet Kune Do. And I call it hidden because it's situations in which Jeet Kune Do has influenced someone or influenced their art, and you don't necessarily know about it because they might not talk about the terms, the terms, they might not use the term Jeet Kune Do in expressing their art or what have you. So I can tell you that in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world, there are a number of high-level, very well-known Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu exponents who actually happen to have Jeet Kune Do training in their backgrounds. Now, some of them will mention it sometimes favorably. Sometimes some of them will mention it a little bit unfavorably, right? But whatever. But they do have Jeet Kune Do in their backgrounds, right? So, for example, a guy like Greg Nelson. Greg Nelson is known as is a pretty well-known MMA coach, right? But Greg Nelson is a Jeet Kune Do guy. Same thing with Eric Paulson. Eric Paulson is a Jeet Kune Do guy. But as things and time have evolved, they're not known today as much for their Jeet Kune Do expertise, even though Jeet Kune Do plays a heavy influence in their development. And if you doubt me on this, hang on until I have people like Eric Paulson and Greg Nelson on the Jeet Kune Do Dialogue show, and then you'll hear them explain it even better than I can, right? And then a final aspect that I'll mention about this Jeet Kune Do thing is because there are different factions in the Jeet Kune Do family and people who think that things should be done differently, and since Bruce Lee himself may not have left a specific blueprint, right? the spread of Jeet Kune Do has been somewhat fractious. You know, because we've got this group of guys who are doing it this way, we got this group of guys who are doing it that way. And so then the general public might not necessarily end up hearing about it. But I think that that Jeet Kune Do, even though it has not, right, or at different times in history, yeah, there was more talk about it. You know, it was featured in the magazines and in the classified ads and what have you in the magazines. But the world has changed, right? And so the emphasis to a certain degree on Jeet Kune Do may have changed also, right? Okay, so the next one. So we're going to spend most time on this question number 3. If Bruce Lee believed that no style was the true style, then why was Jeet Kune Do created as a martial art form? Right? So let me repeat it. If Bruce Lee believed that no style was the true style, then why was Jeet Kune Do created as a martial art form? So I thought, you know, in my infinite brilliance, right, I'd let Bruce Lee himself answer the question. And it's an excerpt from I think it was 1968, Liberate Yourself from Classical Karate. And that's important. You see, he's talking about liberating yourself from classical karate, and he's also, this is written in the 1960s. So even the language or the points that Bruce Lee might have been making in this famous article might not have as much resonance or even relevance here in May of 2018. Right? So anyhow, so I'll read and then I'll give you commentary, read and give you commentary, and then we'll wrap this show up. What then is Jeet Kune Do? Literally, Jeet means to intercept or to stop. Kune is the fist, and Do is the way or the ultimate reality. The way of the intercepting fist. Do remember, however, that Jeet Kune Do is merely a convenient name. I am not interested with the term itself. I am interested in its effect of liberation when Jeet Kune Do is used as a mirror for self-examination. So I think right there, if you get it, Bruce Lee himself is saying what he's given us an idea of a very important aspect, right, for him personally in Jeet Kune Do. I'm not interested with the term itself. I am interested in its effect of liberation when JKD is used as a mirror for self-examination. So this is why I have told people that I think they're wrong when they interpret Bruce Lee's admonition. You probably heard this before when Bruce Lee is reported to say, Jeet Kune Do, it's merely a name, don't fuss over it. I've told people I think they're wrong when they think that means do not fuss over Jeet Kune Do. I think what Bruce Lee was saying is do not fuss over the name. You see, because he never said let the art of Jeet Kune Do be wiped out. He said let the name Jeet Kune Do be wiped out. So you do make a fuss over it. And I've said this many times before. Everybody who is into something, right, makes a fuss over it, especially if it is something that plays an important role in their lives, right? Okay, all right, so I'm getting the signal that I didn't do the shirt thing because apparently I forgot to do it last week. So here we go. This is today's Bruce Lee shirt. Okay, good. All right, enough of that. All right, so always fuss over the art. You don't have to fuss over the name, right? So, you know, original Jeet Kune Do, pre-1973 Jeet Kune Do, classical Jeet Kune Do, Jeet Kune Do concepts, whatever, right? Let's just stay true to the essence of the art, people, all right? Okay, continuing on the Liberate Yourself article. Unlike a classical martial art, let me interject again. Remember, this was written in the 60s, so you have to kind of have that, that mentality as you read this stuff, as you hear these words. Unlike a classical martial art, there is no series of rules or classifications of technique that constitutes a distinct Jeet Kune Do method of fighting. JKD is not a form of special conditioning with its own rigid philosophy. So this is why, again, this is my breakdown, this is why Bruce Lee ultimately had to go beyond the mere idea of Wing Chun, fencing, and boxing. because that would have constituted a distinct JKD method of fighting, because everything would have had to be answered in terms of Wing Chun, fencing, and boxing. And the way the story goes, or the legend goes, is in the fight with Wong Jack Man, he realized that the Wing Chun, if you read, I just saw it, but I didn't make a note of the page because I didn't really know I was going to talk about it. But here in Sifu Dan's Jeet Kune book, there is a small report on the Wong Jack Man fight. And it says that what Bruce Lee realized was that his Wing Chun techniques were not the most efficient way of countering Jack Man's low horn Kyun techniques. And this is what moved Bruce Lee beyond the mere idea of Wing Chun, fencing, and boxing, right? So because he wanted to be free of that limitation. So to continue what he says, it looks at combat, it referring to Jeet Kune, it looks at combat not from a single angle, but from all possible angles. While JKD utilizes all the ways and means to serve its end, it is bound by none and is therefore free. In other words, JKD possesses everything, but is in itself possessed by nothing, right? So that means if Jeet Kune needs to strike, if you need to punch, if you need to elbow, if you need to hit with the knee, if you need to kick in order to be efficient, then that's what should happen. If it needs to be grappling, then that's what should happen. That's what Jeet Kune will do, right? If it needs to be weaponry, then that's what Jeet Kune will do. So if you understand the idea of no limitation, notice how limited the initial idea of Wing Chun, boxing, and fencing would have been. So obviously, in Bruce Lee's evolution, he broke through that barrier of confinement of thinking. And this is where we end up with things that are expressed like this. Because remember, the Wong Jack Man fight, if I have my dates correctly, right? The Wong Jack Man fight was 1964. This article was written in 1968. So Bruce Lee now had, now he'd had 4 years to reflect on things and to delve more deeply into them. And this is what we come up with. In other words, Jeet Kune possesses everything, but is in itself possessed by nothing, right? Therefore, to try and define Jeet Kune in terms of a distinct style, be it Kung Fu, karate, street fighting, Bruce Lee's martial art, etc., is to completely miss its meaning. Its teaching simply cannot be confined within a system. So this is where we get the idea of a system without a system, like a system of no system, right? So there cannot be a set, unbendable approach wherein everyone does everything exactly the same. That's classical martial art. Wherever in the world, and you guys know I pick on Shotokan all the time because I have a huge affection for them, but wherever in the world a white belt is training in Shotokan, you can be assured that they're pretty much doing the same thing, because there is a set approach to learning the art of Shotokan wherever it is in the world that you're doing it. There is no set approach to the learning of JKD. That's a little bit of a misnomer, and I'll clear that up in a second, right? But I think the reason why Bruce Lee realized that there could not be a set, unbendable approach is because he realized that people are individuals. So it goes back to what I was telling you before. The style that your style is just that. It's your approach. So there could be somebody else talking Jeet Kune on Facebook Live, and that guy might not wear a tam, because he might not have dreadlocks, so that might not be part of his style. He might not use it because some people tell me sometimes that my hands go all over the place when I talk. So it might be a guy who just lectures to you like this. That is not my style because that just does not work for me, right? So, okay, let's keep this going. So since Jeet Kune is at once this and not this, it neither opposes nor adheres to any style. To understand this fully, one must transcend from the duality of for and against into one organic unity which is without distinction. Understanding of Jeet Kune is direct intuition of this unity. Now, it's difficult for you to really get the meaning behind that just hearing me with my funny accent read it to you. But I'm going to read it again. Since JKD is at once this and not this, it neither opposes nor adheres to any style. To understand this fully, one must transcend from the duality of for and against into one organic unity which is without distinctions. Understanding of JKD is direct intuition of this unity. This is a call, see, for people to realize that unity, actual real unity, calls for the allowance of freedom. You see, there are a lot of people out there in the world in different areas, and those of you who are real smart, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? They think that unity means that anybody who disagrees with anybody else, you have to shut them down. That's how you become united. That is not true. It is the allowance of freedom that leads to real unity. The transcendence, like Bruce Lee just said, the transcendent, the duality of for and against. So now there are some people who are firmly entrenched in this camp, in this way of thinking. So we are for this and we are against that, right? Ultimately, the understanding of Jeet Kune is direct intuition of this unity, the transcendent of the duality of us versus them in all of its manifestations, right? Okay, so we're getting to the end of this. There are no prearranged sets or kata in the teaching of Jeet Kune, nor are they necessary. Consider the subtle difference between having no form and having no form. The first is ignorance, the second is transcendence. Well, we talked about that already. Yesterday, the shirt that I was wearing during the Jeet Kune Dialogues program said a couple of things, but one of the things that it said was respond like an echo, right? So the idea of in JKD, the physical manifestation of respond like an echo is like somebody makes a move at you and wham, you just respond. You don't stop to think, oh, are they in left lead or right lead? Is it this punch or that punch or whatever? They make a move towards you. They cross that the fight and measure, right? And they go from being on the rim of fire to being in range, and you are in danger of being hit, and you respond like an echo. And an echo doesn't really say something different to the initial impulse, right? So now this is pretty. I'll go through this again. Through instinctive body feeling. So I'm reading from the article again. Through instinctive body feeling, each of us knows our own most efficient and dynamic manner of achieving effective leverage, balance in motion, economical use of energy, etc. Right? Let me read it again. Through instinctive body feeling, each of us knows our own most efficient and dynamic manner of achieving effective leverage, balance in motion, and economical use of energy. Yeah, well, of course, when you start training, when you train yourself, remember, like Chris Kent says, an aspect of Jeet Kune is training your body to do what you want it to do when you want it done, right? This is what we're talking about here. And each of us knows what our own instinctive body feel is, right? So patterns, techniques, or forms only touch on the fringe of genuine understanding. The core of understanding lies in the individual mind. So again, we're going back to what? The idea of individual freedom. The core of understanding lies in the individual mind, and until that is touched, everything is uncertain and superficial. So it goes back again to what? The idea of style. Your style is your style, not anybody else's, because it's only you who can move the way that you move. And the truth is, right, sometimes that's why you have to be 100% committed to your Jeet Kune training, because let's say you're in a situation where you're a student and you have an instructor. Your instructor can never ultimately give you the answers. It's never been about that. You got to take the personal responsibility for your own development. So that's why in Sifu Inasano's book, it will say that a good instructor is not a giver of truth. A good instructor is a pointer to the individual truth, right? Okay, so let's see if there's anything here. Yeah, oh, I'm going to give you one last thing, guys, before we wrap this up. I'm skipping through some stuff here. Again, Art and Philosophy book, page 56. I'll read this for you. I think this is something I found today, right? I mean, I don't know how many times I've read this book, right? But I think it's a great breakdown, right? So let's see. Okay, so let me read this paragraph for you, right? So bear with me. Bruce was quick to point out that Jeet Kune Do is more than simply a composite of many different styles and systems. It has a definite central theme, preserving the center line, a constant rhythmic flow, and the ability to fit in to the opponent's techniques. And that must be observed at all times. And although the art encompasses many things as we have seen, there's always something to be added, but not in helter-skelter fashion, because the main purpose, is the preservation of the common thread that binds it all together. So again, like I've said, the worst way for, one of the worst ways for you to try to understand what I'm talking about is to listen to my funny accent. So if you've got the book, you should definitely be reading this, page 56, right? And although the art encompasses many things as we have seen, there is always something to be added, but not in helter-skelter fashion, because the main purpose is the preservation of the common thread that binds it all together. That requires some more reading in order to get a deep understanding of it, and then to put it into practice. You see, because one of the I think valid concerns that people have about Jeet Kune Do is when sometimes it's a misperception as we've talked about before. It's when they think that Jeet Kune Do people are adding, that they're constantly adding. And what they don't realize is that there is a time where you need to add something, but it's not additional clay being added to the sculpture. But sometimes you need to add something. So if, for example, it is said in Jeet Kune Do that in the early days, the grappling was not as there was not as in-depth an examination of the grappling as there is today, and largely because of the influence of the shoot wrestling and the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? So it's said that in the old days in Jeet Kune Do, we didn't really contest, we didn't wrestle, we didn't really contest the grappling, but shoot wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gave us a method to delve more deeply into that. Right, so you could say that grappling methods were added, but it was not helter-skelter. It wasn't just let's add more and more and more and more jiu-jitsu or more and more and more shoot wrestling, and now we have more and more in our Jeet Kune Do, because then that would be moving away from the idea of simplifying in Jeet Kune Do. But you've got to add in order to then chisel away. In order to get to the essence of something, you cannot merely dabble in it. You got to do deep diving in order to really understand everything, right? So let me finish with this. There is no mystery about my style. My movements are simple, direct, and non-classical. The extraordinary part of it lies in its simplicity. Every movement in Jeet Kune Do is being so of itself. There is nothing artificial about it. I always believe that the easy way is the right way. Jeet Kune Do is simply the direct expression of one's feelings with the minimum of movements and energy. The closer to the true way of Kung Fu, the less wastage of expression there is, right? So again, I function as not a giver of truth, but as a pointer, right? So you guys got to do your own investigation. I revel in the ability every week to be able to share with you, right? So I really appreciate when you guys chime in. Like I said before, like the video, comment, share it, and when I finish posting, I will go ahead and reply to anything that people have asked. Right? So thanks for tuning in to I Love Jeet Kune broadcast number 26. Right? As always, I'll remind you, if you go to ilovejeetkundo.com, you can get volume 1 of the Quick Skills series, and that's about it. There might not be on Friday a Jeet Kune Dialogues episode because we did that yesterday. You can find that on the I Love Jeet Kune group page, which I changed that up. It's now facebook.com/groups/I Love Jeet Kune. So it's a lot easier to find it. Right? So that's it for today. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Rebel, signing off. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.